I will talk just briefly. I want to do a little bit of an introduction to the project. I'm so glad you guys are here, and I'm so glad that we get to take part in this. I'm going to talk a little bit about the project in very brief terms, and I'm going to introduce you to the folks who made the film that we're going to talk about today, and also introduce you to a couple of stars. This is one of the student activists from 68 who started the organization for which this panel is named, Mr. Joe Tave. The Afro-American Student Society of East Texas in 1968 is our title, Global Citizens, Global Justice. And so I am Shirley, I'm assistant professor of English, and this is a project that we've been working with for the last year, funded in part with an NEH Digital Humanities grant. The question that helps link this particular project about activism, local activism, to global citizenship, and the theme of the conference is a question for me that came out of this report. The question is, what does education for democratic citizenship require in a diverse society? In January of 2012, for the first time since the Truman Commission in 1947, the task force issued a report coming out of the White House that specifically linked the task of training for a democracy to higher education. The first time that happened was under the Truman Commission in '47, when the argument was made that it's a very uncertain time. We've got the Great Depression and World War I and World War II, not quite in that order, and so in this post-war era, the democracy's future was sort of in peril. We didn't quite know what the next steps were. The atom bomb, the hydrogen bomb were all in our space, and so they turned to higher education and said, let's look at this and our potential to help save democracy. I mean, no pressure higher education, right? So in January 2012, the world again remade in some very different ways. We've got, the Arab Spring and the Occupy Wall Street and a bunch of moves across the nation falling on the heels of, the Great Recession, and just, it's an uncertain time. So again, they turn to higher education and say, okay, we need you to help us train citizens for the future. They said in this report, these compounding factors, a variety of them that are listed throughout the report, produce our crucible moment today, which is what they call the report. The country, the economy, and the world demand a different kind of expertise than was required of graduates after World War II, which again is the first time this report was put forward. The kind of graduates we need at this moment in history need to possess a strong propensity for wading into an intensely interdependent, pluralistic world. They need to be agile, creative problem solvers who draw their knowledge from multiple perspectives, both domestic and global, who approach the world with empathy, and who are ready to act with others to improve the quality of life for all. Another name for these graduates is democratic citizens. What I want to introduce to you guys today is this student organization and a couple of the students involved to look at citizenship and engagement with one's community that embody all of these principles that we didn't really have a lot to do with in terms of formal training, and see what we can learn from folks who have really made an impact in a variety of areas. You'll meet, and these are people who have lived a life as engaged as citizens in their local communities and around the world. I met Mr. Joe Tave here years before I actually met him in the archives, in the Afro-American Student Affairs folder in the President Halliday papers. I wanted to understand something about how communication and other things had changed, and local activism may have happened on this campus after desegregation reached this town, which happened in '64. And I kept running into Afro-American Student Society that was marked in our archives and in other places and in local stories as a place that brought forward a list of demands to the president and resulted in all of his demands being met relatively quickly, though not without pain, as will be discussed. including the first African-American administrator, Dr. Ivory Moore, the first African-American faculty, that would be David Talbot, and so forth. So you'll see a lot about that in the film, and I just want to kind of give you a feel for what you're going to see. And I would like to end, after watching the film, with conversation, especially with Mr. Joe Tave, and we have Mr. Belford Page here, so you'll also see in the film, who was here a little bit later, to talk a little bit about some of the groundwork that was that they went through to help make things happen on this campus, and maybe what we can learn from this, and other such efforts. Mr. Tave here is an educator, and he'll have a lot to teach us about that as well. So I'd like to introduce you those first to the team and ask for you guys to say a few words about what you've done for the project, and then we'll just play the film. So start with Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Jones, and I'm a PhD student. I've been working with Shannon pretty much all year on this project, and a lot of my background in the project is focused on aesthetics, images and video, digging in the archives for old imagery, and right now I'm working on the creation and the development of the website that we'll use to house the bulk of our work.
Okay, I'm Kelly Dent. I'm a master's student in political science. I've worked on this project since last fall. Okay, and a lot of my work is in the research field in terms of looking at the historical context and the political context. And I helped copy it.
And the project that we're talking about, you're only going to see a portion of this. It involves this tool, this data source annotation tool, and another documentary and the website that she's talking about is a Digital Humanities project. And so this is one of the pieces, and one that we're excited about sharing with you guys. Sunshine?
Sunshine. Hi, my name is Sunshine. I'm the PhD student in English. My part in the project is like mainly dealing with recording the videos and doing archival research, and also developing the video, and then developing the video and put it up on the system. It's called Popcorn, which is we put the information around the videos.
I should put this piece, this is further context that we've been building on here. Is that not building?
Acknowledge you're going to we're into that modern word that.
I'm sorry here, sorry. We're going to play it here. We'll play it right here. I was going to show you the popcorn, but it's not refreshing on that. Oh, okay, that's what it is. Okay. All right, so this documentary, about 18 minutes, it's going to focus on 1968 primarily, a really difficult time for a society and for all of us as we try to find out what the next steps for this world of ours would be. We focused on that year, and we focused on situating the stories of Mr. Joe Tave and the formation of the Afro-American Student Society, and also the short time that Dr. John Carlos spent on our campus the fall before, the man who would go on to raise his fist as part of the group atop the medal stand in Mexico City in 1968. So we're going to take you back to 68 for about 18 minutes. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah. There's one bit of audio we can't get to work, and I'll just tell you what's said. I mean, it works, but it's not here. She's about to say the whole thing centers on one word, integration.
East Texas State University began the process of desegregation in 1964. That summer, then University President and outspoken segregationist James G. Chee called together all faculty and staff to announce ET's immediate compliance with civil rights legislation mandated desegregation everywhere, including at the last two public colleges in Texas still upholding racial barriers. This is a story about what happened next. If, as Martin Luther King argued in 1958, segregation led to hate based on fear resulting from the unknown, perpetuated by the lack of communication, forced by our physical and legal separation, how did communication change after desegregation reached this rural university town?
Here is Claude Shannon's diagram by which almost any communication process can be schematically represented. The information source selects the desired message out of a set of possible messages. The transmitter changes the message into the signal, which is sent over the communications channel to the receiver, where it is decoded back into the message and delivered to the destination.
It makes a grand Christmas gift, and so do the other Sylvania radios, the Catalina Portable, the radio clocks, including the Nightlighter with Panelists and dial.
On AM radio in North America, cleared channel stations are those most protected from interference from other stations. Theoretically, then, perhaps the speech that G delivered in 1964 and the admissions policies that followed should have enabled the sorts of communication across difference that integration promised. Of course, proximity alone did not solve racism in America. Meaningful communication across difference required far more than a change in admissions policies.
For some, the answer is tremendously complicated, tied up in a maze of past associations and present influences. Sometimes opinions are expressed with grave misgivings and a sense of guilt. The past slips through despite what is said.
Every such system contains noise. Noise is a term used in the communications field to designate any outside force which acts on the transmitted signal to vary it from the original.
Noise both complicated the desired communication and enabled the establishment of new channels necessary for that communication. The process began the minute the first African-American students set foot on our campus.
You can never whip these birds if you don't keep you and them separate. I found that out plenty. You've got to keep the white and the black separate.
Hey, college you're going to? Where's it at? Texas, Florida, that's where it's at. Draw!
This is great for the people and makes the eggshells even thinner for the Secret Service, whose job it is to guard the man. And here they come, right down toward us. I can team up with Kennedy. Kennedy's stepping in the car first. The president. They go in the back seat now.
Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
Less than an hour's drive from Dallas, where JFK would breathe his last breath in 1963, past the controversial sign that hung in the rural community of Greenville from 1921 until the late 1960s. ETSU students and local citizens felt the ripple of social justice just as profoundly as they felt the sting of Jim Crow. Desegregation changed everything. Desegregation changed nothing.
We invented the nigger. I didn't invent it.
White people invented it. I've always known, I had to know by the time I was 17 years old. What you were describing was not me. What you were afraid of was not me. It had to be something else. You invented it. So it had to be something you were afraid of. You invented the event.
I have some very sad news for all of you, and I think sad news for all of our fellow citizens and people who love peace all over the world. And that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight.
Noise continued to challenge meaningful communication across difference.
If anything acts on the signal so as to vary it in an unpredictable and undesirable way in the communication system, it is noise.
Noise from the past and fear about our very futures distorted signals transmitted from all sides.
In 15 or 20 years' time, the black man will have the whip hand over the white man.
My thanks to all of you, and I'm on to Chicago, and let's get there.
Oh my God. Senator Kennedy has been shot.
President Johnson made an impassioned plea for reason and order in the country.
In 1968, noise filled the airwaves around the world. Everything we thought we knew about ourselves and one another seemed to unravel with the assassinations of MLK and Bobby Kennedy and riots in major cities around the globe. Campus unrest everywhere hit a crescendo as losses suffered in Vietnam became increasingly intolerable, and the promises of civil rights legislation appeared increasingly unlikely. In 1968, at the Mexico City Olympics, sprinters John Carlos and Tommy Smith called global attention to the persistence of racism by taking full advantage of the means of persuasion available to them as black athletes representing the nation to the world.
They do not understand the Olympic philosophy of no discrimination because of race, religion, or political affiliations.
Good morning to you. The Olympic Games are 1 week old today, and yesterday, the 6th day, was the most dramatic so far. It started with the news that the black power disciples Tommy Smith and John Carlos, the Olympic 200 meters gold and bronze medalists, had been suspended by the United States Olympic Committee and given 48 hours.
The world was watching. The message they tried to transmit through that global channel was about equality and social justice.
All we ask for is equal chance to be a human being. And as far as I see now, we're 5 steps below the ladder. And anytime we try and touch the ladder, they can put their foot on our head and don't want us to climb up.
It was not a gesture of hate, Tommy Smith explained to reporters later. It was a gesture of frustration.
And bring about the freedom of these people by any means necessary.
Joshua, you better choose your friends rather than college. Campus still on 118th Street, you know.
Yeah, I know.
ETSU track coach Delmer Brown recruited John Carlos from Harlem in 1966, just 2 years before this global demonstration of what Edward P.J. Corbett would call the rhetoric of the closed fist. Carlos was highly attuned to racism's complexity and ubiquity.
When you walk off a plane and walk in and see, white restaurant, only black restaurant, and then walk in the white restaurant, look like I could fry some eggs on the floor because it was so clean, and then walk over 25, 30 yards and see the black restaurant, there's paper, water, gnats flying around. It's, whoa, I know that's not the way we live, but that's not the way we live in my house. Something's wrong. To hear your name go from Johnny to boy, the word Negro was so close to the other word, until I kind of raised up what you call me, coach.
In this context, Carlos would become inextricably linked to the boycott that would change his life the very next year when, at the Commerce Post Office in the fall of 1967, he picked up the latest issue of Track and Field.
I was reading that at the same time I was living that in terms of social issues that was taking place in society, and I was actually living those same issues in East Texas State University.
Almost immediately, local reporters began flocking to black Olympic-bound athletes around the nation, many of whom, like Carlos, said that they were eager to participate in the boycott. In Commerce, as elsewhere, such public statements about ongoing racism were met with widespread local resistance.
Don't let anybody make you think that God serves America as his divine messianic force.
I mean, like Joe said, I mean, we were mad. We, you know, anything, I don't, it's just, it touches you because of the fact he was like John Carlos later on. John stood up for us. Nobody else would. Martin Luther King stood up for us. Nobody else would. Well, just shoot him like that. Gonna kill the dream.
Of course, it was on every channel. I was angry and hurt. So people were crying and sobbing and looking, and I said, what the hell is it going to be? I was angry. At the lack of leadership, at the lack of commitment, and being just lost.
You kill a dreamer without a dream.
Amidst the angst that fell across the nation, that very night as America grieved, university students everywhere began planning their next steps.
So I formulated Afro-American Student Society of East Texas State. Of course, that was ASSET, and that's where ASSET came from.
The next day, following the MLK march and demonstration he helped organize, Joe Tave delivered a rousing speech which, according to campus news, was interrupted by applause several times. In it, Tave encouraged his fellow students to, quote, unite and fight our sick white brothers with love and nonviolence, as Dr. King would have us do.
There are other factors which can keep the information from reaching its destination intact. The background and conditioning of the receiving apparatus may so differ from that of the transmitter that it may be impossible for the receiver to pick up the signals without distortion.
Distortion during such troubling times seems inevitable. Meaningful communication across difference is difficult, even in the best of circumstances. These were not the best of circumstances.
The FBI called my mother and told her that the reason that my life was threatened was because I was a Black Panther. I suppose that was an effort to undermine the stability of my presence here, or my influence. I'm not there, okay, so then, divide and conquer.
Voice reaches everywhere throughout the land, into almost every car, into almost every room where people live and work.
Though the campus was largely isolated and the students overwhelmingly conservative, at least as compared to many public universities of its size, campus activism was nonetheless on the rise. In May 1968, 1 month after the formation of ASSET and alongside several other student activist groups, the Regional Conference of the Students for a Democratic Society sent a field representative to ET. What they found both surprised and excited the representatives who suggested that they'd witnessed on the ETSU campus proof that, quote, not only are there people at ETSU ready for activism, but there is strong indication that this region is populated with hundreds of potentially radical students, and it is up to us to find them. Against this backdrop, local African-American students were able to establish a viable channel for communication with campus administrators. With Joe Tave, who became the organization's president on the night of MLK's assassination, ASSET presented university administrators with a Declaration of Rights that included rights to African-American faculty and administrators, fair and equal housing, access to campus employment, and courses in African-American studies. In a few short years, all of their demands would be met, setting in motion a series of key hires and other changes that made future communication channels possible and locally meaningful. It wasn't easy. Such things never are.
I wasn't on that, I'm not a nigger.
Purely a white problem, not a Negro problem.
I give you your problem back. You're the nigger that is.
Radio clocks, including the nightlighter with panelists and dial.
Some 30
always over an equal chance.
That's flying around. That's wrong. Something's wrong.
So I was so eager to get you to play this film that I neglected to ask our stars to introduce themselves. And so, I don't know, I'd like to direct some questions to you guys, and I'd also like to open up the floor to any questions that you guys may have. We have Mr. Joe Tave right here, and Belford Page right here, Mr. Belford Page. So do you guys want to come up? Because we're also recording. I have questions, and I invite you guys, if you have questions for them, for us, to, I'd like to return us in theme to the question that that drove the 2012 report: what is education for democratic citizenship require in a diverse society? But whatever we want to discuss is good for me. Before we do that, though, could Mr. Tave, would you introduce yourself to this group?
Yes, I'm Joe Tave, and I'm honored to be here, very pleased, and happy with the efforts of Dr. Carter and her staff, who went back and uncovered this setting and this situation, because like I thought all was phenomenal in terms of the struggle and the suffering and the pain and whatever. And so God bless somebody along who uncovered and found, and so we get that story out, and it is just as important and relevant today as it was 44 years ago. And my hope and prayers that I certainly have 4 fewer days ahead of me than have already passed, that this would be a benefit to those who are in positions of leadership and influence to make a difference, whether it's a faculty, whether it's an individual, throughout our society. Because like our society is laden, even more so since November the 6th, with noise. And what was the term we were talking about earlier? Noise and
nonsense.
And nonsense. And nonsense. And I'm sure with Hunter that noise is a nice euphemism for nonsense, among other situations or terms we use to apply to what is going on, what is going on. But we've got to make sure that we, as we move towards the future, for the future of our country, that we are able to look at things differently and bring about some changes.
Mr. Page, would you introduce yourself? Because you saw him in the last part of the film, for sure.
Yeah, my name is Belford Page, and I attended ET, East Texas State from 68, I guess, to 71. And I came in on a mass scholarship from SMU, and it was quite a difference from being in that big environment with Dallas, born and raised, coming to a separated society, I guess, because of the fact I wasn't exposed like that. Texas was so big, it was like, you know, you can get everything here in Texas, like go somewhere else. Then you come to Commerce and you meet another influence from the north and a hate that existed. And I said, well, yeah, I didn't make myself. God made me. I mean, you made you, so what's the problem? You know, and I went to the Methodist church, and SMU was a Methodist school, and, you know, so I was kind of shielded. And like I told Dr. Carter several times, I thought everybody loved me, black, white, Indians, Mexicans, you know, and then you come down here and people start calling you Negro and Sunshine and Midnight and making these jokes. And hey, some consequences are going to be paid, you know, maybe after dark, but that was just part of, you know, the deal. I mean, we were young men and rowdy and, you know, we didn't break in your house, steal your TV, or rape your daughter. So, you know, when you're coming at us like that, then you're going to have some payback. So, but other than that, I just appreciate the fact that's happening right now. I see it still in existence in our tax office. I moved from Dallas to Greenville, Texas, 7 years ago, me and my wife. And when you go pay property tax, it's not a black face in the tax office. So we got a new police chief over in Greenville. He's from St. Louis. And I was talking to him and says, hey, there's no black officers, no black firemen, no black Homeland Security. And, you know, I'm retired from the federal government. I said, well, you're getting federal tax dollars to build your highways and your roads and your schools and your bridges. And you're not, I mean, something is wrong if you don't have some sort of mentoring program, or everybody doesn't have a criminal background and, you know, you do drugs or guns, or, well, we're not going to hire. But there's a lot of nepotism that exists, and there's a lot of underlying problems there that still close that door.
So I'd like to ask one more question before I open up the floor. Both of you grew up in segregated communities. Mr. Tave in Mineola and Mr. Page in Dallas. Could you talk both a little bit about your background before you came to UT? I'm starting with Mr. Page, Mr. Tave here.
Okay. Yes, I was born and raised in Mineola, Texas, which is just, I guess, kind of south and east here in north of Tyler, between the two cities. And my people all the way back to slavery. And I was here when blacks in Texas, well, I'm sorry, my people were here, I'm sorry. And I guess I was too, because they passed on their genes. But my people were here when slaves in Texas received notice of the Emancipation Proclamation on June 19th, which became Juneteenth in 1865. And so I have a long history. And so small community, segregated. I didn't experience the Klan and some of the abject hatred and bitterness and whatever that many people in other states and maybe some areas of Texas experienced. And there were like 5, you know, when I college is 6 actually, within a 6-8 mile radius. And so I grew up thinking about nothing but going to college. And even though I mentioned my mother in the deal, my father died when I was like 18, so in my senior year in high school. And so I grew up in a situation where I didn't have a father. And so I thought about that when I see this. But that's why I just referenced her. He was deceased in '64. But and so I finished high school, segregated, and I went to Wiley College in Marshall. I spent 1 year, and I don't know to this day how I ended up in East Texas State. There's some real strange things. I've asked my physician friend who was here as a student. He said that I made an application, I got financial aid, and okay, says, and I still to this day, I do not know how I ended up here. I don't recall making an application formally. And so that's what got me to Commerce, and I spent 1 year at Wiley, and I finished my bachelor's in another 2 years, and a master's in 1 year. So I had done like 4 years of education, 1 at Wiley, and 3 here for my bachelor's and master's. And that was pretty much it. And I was always aware and cognizant of segregation and the hatred and bitterness that was directed, and I experienced some things as far as my father's encounter with somebody taking our property. But anyway, so, we didn't have very much at my high school. And what I mean by that, we had teachers who cared, and they taught us well, and I learned. But as far as having the same equal educational opportunity that they had in high school, which is just maybe less than a mile away from our school there, we didn't have that. And I'll say this, and we had a real good football team over the years, and so we had to go to Mineola High School to get some equipment or something because we were in the championship playoffs. And I'd always wanted to study medicine, and because I was good in math and science in school. We had black physicians that was there over a period of growing up. And so when we were there, I remember when we played basketball before they built our gym, that we couldn't use the restroom, things, we had to go outside for the personal needs we had. There was this big opening there. And so when we were walking, my football coach and maybe about 3 or 4 of my classmates. And so I just fell back because I've always been curious. I fell back because I wonder what is here. So I fall back and I go through the stair right quickly because school was going on. I know I was out of line, but I was ready to pay the price. And so I go in there and I walk into the science laboratory for Mineola High School. We had a science table, what do you want to call it, about 3 feet wide and maybe 5 feet long, a wash basin, a Bunsen burner, very few test tube flags, and the other things that you would customarily work with. So anyway, when I walk in there at Mineola High School, they had these little cubicles. There was where 4 students sat there. Let me go back. And then we had 2 televisions, 2 microscopes. One worked and one didn't. So by the time 17, 18 of us finished looking and the thing, the class period was over. So we were certainly denied. But anyway, I saw that, and so they had these cubicles where 4 students shared a microscope, a wash basin, everything that they needed. I was angered by that, and I'm still to this day, not in an individual, but in the fact, in terms of what that situation did to me. Now, a friend of mine who was my physician, he finished a year behind me, and he was able to go to Mineola High School as they had begun to integrate. And he just learned about science and math classes. And so when I applied for pre-med, I saw math and science classes that I never imagined that even existed. And the first thing I told myself was that I can't be a physician. Can't be a physician, and that was the deal. And the other thing that was really a driving force in my life, and many of us that grew up in Mineola, there's a gentleman, his name was Willie Brown, and he was the Speaker of the California State Assembly for like 15 years. After term limits got him out of office, very, very powerful. He became mayor of San Francisco, and et cetera. And so he was born and raised, he's about 12 or so years older than I was. But I share the story that our parents, and my parents and others in the community fed us Willie Brown cookies throughout most of our lives. You know, the Willie Brown list, and so that was that star, whatever the case is, that we could focus on as a guiding light for us. So it was always a challenge and always encouraging for me. So when I got here to Commerce, seeing the Old South Week and other things that were going on, the segregation, we couldn't work in certain jobs. You know, white kids had the jobs in the offices and they had access to the test, but they prepared for the professor. So they were making hundreds when we were making 75 or 80, you know, still that inequality, you know. And then we couldn't stay off campus. There were real nice apartments like the Riviera apartment and I'm forgetting it now, the Ponderosa, but only whites could live there. But through the efforts that resulted from ASAP and our energies there, the city of Commerce passed an open housing ordinance and whatever. So that kind of, it's kind of the setting. I came here to get an education, and that was foremost in my mind, because I was the first of my direct family, even though I had cousins who had graduated. And so that was that motivational factor, and I promise you, like, I didn't know how I got to this school, this university, without applying that asset and all that happened. It was like a force that had control of my life, and I kept trying to get out of that. I promise you, I was sure with a hunter that somebody that was like I tried to jump off the horse while it was racing, and my foot would be entrapped in the stirrup, and I had to right myself. I do not know. It was just like a force that had control of my writing and my thinking, and even the fears. Because that was 1968, folks. If you don't understand that, they'll still hang the black folks, still hang the niggas, quote, unquote. That word that it's been real, and it still is. But and whatever, so I've gone along. So over the last 15 or so years, I've come to realize that God was using me as a vessel, and then I had no control, so I couldn't stop it, and even to this day.
I have a couple follow-up questions for you, actually, that speak to what you said about how it was, for you from the beginning, a system, that systemic thing. It wasn't an individual thing. If you could take us back to 2 stories you told me about, one active and one just the way it was, about negotiations with white community members, including your surprise about the fact that segregation hadn't barred you from the public library, and also the story that you told about how you guys set up a block party.
Yes. When I was growing up, I don't know. I've always had this something that kind of drove me and moved me, and I still can't put my hands on it. But yes, when I was a teenager growing up in Mineola, the lady who became homecoming, first black homecoming queen here, the kids that she was from Mineola, and as teenagers as we were growing up, I was always doing things. I never liked anybody being mistreated, whatever. But anyway, so Martha and the Dumb Devils had a song out, Dancing in the Streets, and so we didn't have any place to, well, we had a little teenage place to do a dance, but anyway, so I thought, I said, well, it sure would be nice if we could have a street party in Mineola. You know, we just hear about it maybe Belinda after watching bands. I wish we could have one here in Mineola. So anyway, so I talked with Belinda, and so I called the mayor, get his name right now, and I told him we'd like to meet with him, and so she and I went down and met with him, and I told him we'd like to have a street party, a street dance. And so he said, it wasn't no, like, he didn't stare me down like with hatred, and he said, well, Joe, we probably can't do that on the streets because of safety hazard. He said, but if you all agree with this, at the barn, the trucks and things like that, it's real nice there. We'll make sure it's clean for you. It's light electricity, so we'll provide electricity if you want to do that. So I said, well, why not? So we went ahead, finally turned out to be a great success. And then that, what else?
Well, just I think the point that I think is so brilliant about this is just that, how does a teenager know to go to the mayor,
I wish I could share that with you. I just had that daring, and I said, let's go to the mayor and talk with him. He runs the city.
And he set it up. So I guess what I like about this illustration is it sort of complicates our understanding, I think, in general, about how a segregated community works. And that is just one of many examples, I'm sure, of the complexity of humans living in the same space together.
And you asked me about 2 matters, and I think I covered
the other one was
one.
the library.
Oh, the library. Oh, yes. The segregated times at Mineola, we were able to go to the public library, and I never understood that. And we had a theater there, a select theater. We had an area upstairs there. But yes, we were able to go to the public library as far back as I can remember, even before I was able to go and read. And then when they built the Merit Library, we went there with everybody else, but it was still segregated.
Yeah. So one microscope for 20 kids, and
yes.
And so just the complexity of things, which is an interesting, I think, movement next to, we go to the president of the university and we say, hey, we've got these things that need to happen for the whole community, so let's do it.
So I didn't know how to do anything any different, because I was studying political science and loved history and the Constitution and whatever. So when I formulated the asset and even later on the demands, I said, hey, you have to deal with this. This is what we need to take to him, et cetera. And so again, and then I was just, Linda and I were laughing just recently about how naive we were, and when I was talking about still killing black folks. So of course I got my life threatened. He came to pick me up, Dr. Coles, John Coles, who left here and went to Texas A&M University at College Station. He came to my dormitory about 2 o'clock in the morning and told me that Joe said, I've been on the phone, and I have the utmost respect for those 2 individuals, even to this day. Like Dr. Joe Tave, who's my political science and constitutional law professor here at Commerce, here in East Texas. But anyway, he said, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and I've been out doing some things in the community with a physician named Dr. Henry Harris, who was working with us. Of course, my father-in-law A.C. Wilkins, who the elementary school is named for here. But anyway, so I said, what is Dr. Goldie came to? Joe, I found that, and I've been talking, your life has been threatened, and we thought it was best that we get you enslaved people. There's a drop from the arm to a dark room in the old administration building, right about here someplace. And I was just so naive, I just went with them, you know? And then who would just volunteer just to go with somebody during that time, not knowing what was up? Because most of the time, I guess, I was just somebody coming here in the store, somebody coming and getting you and hanging you over the cases. I just went, you know? But I did leave a note, because I was afraid that I left a note for my mother that not to close the account for me. I don't know if they're going to kill me or what. So they brought me to the administration building, then they gave me this guard, and sent me to Greenville, and I had a cousin that lives there. He was a former city councilman there too. And I didn't have enough sense to even though we didn't have cell phones, but I had a dime or something and called him and said, Frank, you know, I'm in Greenville, it's threatening my life or something. I was just going and stuff. And then so they said they couldn't find a place for me to stay in Greenville. And so they took me almost to Dallas. There's a hotel, they're still there. It's called something else now, but it was the Meadow View Hotel at the time in '68.
I think it's Rose City or Cattle.
Maybe kind of right in there, like yeah. Well, no, it was on 30. Yeah, right along there. Right, that's right. Okay, but anyway, so just quickly, and so this guy goes in, whatever. He takes his gun off, he takes his gun out, slams it on the deal, and says, "Well, if anybody tries to think, we got what we need to protect it." I had called and asked my friend to call him up and get one of the pastor and local leaders at home, called the FBI to come over. But anyway, I mean, I was afraid, and then I wasn't afraid. And I look back, that's quite a juxtaposition to be in there. Afraid, not afraid. What is the matter with you? You know, what's happening? But anyway, and so, make a long story short, so I spent the night. Well, I didn't sleep, but I stayed over this hotel. And I brought them back to campus, and they did. The FBI were here. They come from Paris, Texas, and so they interviewed me. The black students didn't know what was going on, where I was, etc. And so they interviewed me. They were more concerned with the FBI. They told me that, you know, using some of those tactics and techniques that they used in the 60s. Well, they told me that, well, you're pretty popular on campus, probably a black student, right? You're lying. What angered me, the reason I mentioned in the story here, is that to further diminish my influence or whatever, to take me out of the picture, they called my mother down in Minneapolis, and they told her that I was a Black Panther. I was aware of the Black Panthers, but I had no connection or anything else. Even that SBS meeting that took place, I knew nothing about it. I probably was busy trying to pass a test or something. But anyway, they told my mother that I was a Black Panther, so that's the reason I had my life break. Of course, that frightened my mother half to death, and people in the community said, well, come home, you know, don't go back over there, we don't want you, don't want any harm to come to you, etc. And I went home and I came back, you know. But anyway, so it was just those kind of things and those kind of tactics and techniques that were used. And whatever, you know the story that you study, and if you haven't studied, you should. And you know, it's like, hopefully this country won't go back to those days. And even with this, probably when I was coming over there, and I'll see. I was listening to a couple of AM stations. I listened to KRLD, and then they had this thing on, and there was this financial advisor, and he was talking about how the serious condition that this country's in, and whatever, in the next 4 years, it just might just disintegrate. If enough people here that buy into that noise, and what the case is, then we'll go back to that hatred and whatever. That'll be the easy way out to deal with an uncomfortable situation. And then another station I was listening to, I flipped from that one, and they had the John Birch Society program on. And I'm like, oh, what on earth is going on? But you know, are we moving backwards? You know, things certainly aren't static at this point. But I would like to tell them, as I will tell you, you can't talk to me about some fallacy, some lie, blacks receiving this, and Mexican this, and women this, etc. One of the greatest takeaway programs that ever existed in this country, was the Homestead Act of 1862. This land was taken from Native Americans, and whether you like it or not, and whether it's a great society that's been built, no doubt. I'm happy to be a part of that. But this land was taken from the Native Americans, and whatever. Then tens of millions of people were brought from their motherland. They served as slaves for several hundreds of years with no hope for freedom, and no opportunity, even when it supposedly ended. and whatever, and then you're going to turn around and say, if you just, as part of our manifest destiny, you just promise to go so we can take over this land and whatever, move these people out of the way, you just sell it. I think maybe it's $160, $180, whatever number of acres of land, etc. It's yours after 3 years if you just sell that. That's welfare. So you can't talk to me, I don't care who you are, and tell me that because I'm not receiving assistance, maybe Social Security. Social Security was not begun when blacks started migrating to the north, and welfare was already on the books. It was already on the books, you know. So talk to somebody else about that who doesn't know, and because like we can go round and round with that, and I can close some historical fact. But anyway, so that's where we are, and then that's noise. That's noise. We have to cut through that. I don't know what our political, racial, other persuasion might be. We must cut through that so that we can progress and improve the human condition. That's for all of us. Because I'll say this, and I'll say it. In the southern states, in the southern United States of America, there was a time that a Republican could even think about running for office and being elected after Reconstruction, after the end of the Civil War, and it's still being fought and whatever. Then all of a sudden, the Southerns have flip-flopped, what the case is, and the Democrat can't get elected anymore. It seems such hypocrisy that exists. So if you can flip-flop like that, we can begin to work together to continue to solve our problems so our country can move forward. It's been 40-something years, and I fought and what I went through, hoping things would be better for my children. Now I have 3 grandchildren, and then they're faced with the same thing, even though things are much better. Okay.
I'd like Mr. Page to say a little bit about his background, but I also would like for you guys to ask questions that you may have.
You made a reference to President Joseph G. Segregationists, and do you have an opinion on now that we have a library in Lake and so many other things named in his honor?
Well, that doesn't trouble me at all, because like people here who respected my father-in-law, E.C. Williams, they named a school for him long before he passed or left this earth, and so those kind of things are good. I'm glad to see that in Greenville, the commissioners, they named that stretch of the freeway there, MLK Drive. But one thing that doesn't come out in the story, and Dr. Joseph Slater, a wonderful man, he had gotten a PhD from UT Austin in 1931, and he was from Missouri, and whatever. So he was working with along with Larry Downey and some other professors. So I was being fed a whole lot of information that Dr. Halliday and even the black kids didn't know that I was privy to. But the other thing that came out of that, it was more than just his saying, well, y'all come on in, we got to integrate. It was told to me that he had made a statement, I know Dr. Saban's here, that before he let any niggas on this campus, now this is a state university, and the governor had spoken, that before he let any niggas go on this campus, he would drink his own blood, and Governor Conley encouraged him to go ahead and do so, because like the school was going to desegregate. That's not in these articles and whatever, but I was told that by professors. So I have no problem with that recognition of him, because like he served, and he should be recognized just like others who make contributions to the greatest cities and countries and whatever.
Yeah, but by '64, every other university except for the one that G was dean at before he came here, and this one has desegregated. So he held on as hard as he could, as long as he could.
And what about, and so kind of follow up, from your battles early on to try to bring equality to campus, looking present day at about 20% African-American population and more than 10% Hispanic population students, and yet the staff and faculty still cannot, will appear never to even be able to match, with less than 5% of the staff and faculty being representative of those minority populations. Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, the more things change, the more they remain the same, you know, and what have you. But perhaps there's a lack of maybe again, nothing angers me more than people being just lost. You know, what do we do? Just lost above your butt. And what I began to think, use that computer God gave you and put humanists in it to go and try to make a difference, perhaps the Afro-American community, maybe even faculty and staff who are here. The status quo has been like a recidivist, has come back and we're back where we were. And so maybe nobody is concerned about that. And maybe the tragedy of that is that many young people, African-American, Mexican, Hispanics, and young whites are not aware of what has gone on. And so it's just like, well, everything's okay, nothing happened. So perhaps that's part of the problem, but there's a need for activism because like with globalization, and there were some things going on globally during this time, and then this conference is about that. And so young people need to be prepared to deal with that, and like somebody quoted or something, and with a different philosophy about communicating and relating, not from that ethnocentric standpoint of this society being the United States of America is the greatest way to look at things. If you can't fit into our little scope right here, then you are insignificant. That cannot be, that will not work in our society any longer. So hopefully some of you all can take some of this back to your lesson, and then you challenge young people just to stand up for what is right, you know, and for the truth. And for the truth, you know, maybe that needs to be shared a lot. Or I'm still sharing that a little bit in terms of teaching that.
So we just have another couple of minutes, and we haven't heard a backdrop from this gentleman who grew up in Dallas. We can ask another question, or we can, if you could tell us a little bit about maybe some of the differences or similarities that you experienced growing up around the same time, but in an urban environment, a segregated community.
Well, I guess, you know, my deal was, I wanted to play football, so I was pretty good at math, so I got a math scholarship to SMU, which I transferred to East Texas State to get away from mom and them, so I could, you know, kind of skip shoot hooky. I never met Joe when he was here. I graduated in '68, and I guess he was leaving in '68. I graduated high school in '69. Okay, so he was like up there intellectually, and I'm like down here with the gay
But they just didn't go to class. I did.
Yeah, I'm telling you the truth, that's true. We went to practice, but not to class. But it was just, you know, I mean, I guess a lot of white people use it. Some of my best friends were white. This happened to me you know, my son said, Dad, it's not racial, it's a spiritual thing. Because, you know, you got God, and your God is motivating us. God created us. We didn't create ourselves to be black, and you guys to be white. It's a God thing. And it's a spiritual thing, so he says, you're going to have white people on your side and some black people against you. So you can't call that racial. It's a spiritual deal, and God is coming back. I mean, you can look at Hurricane Sandy. I know I'm telling about the future now, but I'm just saying, because Joe just hit it right on the head. I don't know how I got these Texas State. It was just throwing dart.
It was the salad. You said it was a big salad bowl.
Oh yeah. Well, I was in a project called Upward Bound. Yeah. And Upward Bound was in the inaugural year for it at SMU. It was in 1966, I guess. Where you, every Saturday you go to campus, you get college life, and then summer, you go spend the summer. Again, it's hard, I'll never forget it. But in any event, I was getting away from Dallas. Everybody was going to North Texas State. So I saw East Texas State. So the counselor brought me down, and I saw this giant salad bowl. I mean, it was just fresh salad. I don't know if they had their own garden or what, but it was just, back then we had Highland Park cafeteria you could go to, and they had a similar bowl, but that big, but it was just, you know, it was just ideal. And then for it to be, for football, you know, you're in the meetings and you're with teammates, and I mean, we had some white guys that would whoop your butt, black or white, it didn't matter, so you forget that fantasy about a white boy being soft, you know, and we had some black players that were sorry. So, you know, we just bonded. And then here's the outer force, the, I don't know, the KAs, we call them KKKs. KAs, fraternity group here. And And he had a, yeah, I guess it was. Yeah, had the big wagon with the rebel flag, and it was like, wow, I mean, where are these guys lying at? I mean, because I was telling Dr. Carter earlier, I saw Dr. McFarland's name on that building, and Bub Taylor was the math, I guess he was over math department then, and he would take you in, and I said, hey, these math tests, you know, what are you talking about? I want a math scholarship from the A&M-Commerce Foundation, and I've never seen this, what you're talking about, differential equation. So I had to double book. I mean, I got a book for football, I got a book for math, and it's like, differential equations, okay. That's similar to algebra? No, no. Is it similar to trig? No. It's kind of spin off from trig, you know, where you're gonna have a diversion or conversion, or, you know, so it's like, then you get out here and you see somebody, you can't even communicate, and then there's somebody calling you nigger and chucking rocks, and I'm from Dallas, so it's like shotguns or 45s, or which one you pick, and it's like, well, hey man, what's wrong with this white boy? I don't know, man, he's a redneck. You know, we don't mess with, I mean, it's like, and then, hey, when you're white.
Well, it kind of makes this story you tell where when you're on the football field, how different it is from once you leave, and it starts the minute you leave the stadium walk.
Oh, yeah, that was, for practice, we would have to run, there's a tunnel, and there was a Kmart, Sparks or something, right where McDonald's is now. And these rednecks would be Gibson's. Was it Gibson? I think it was Gibson's. They'd be in the back of a pickup truck waiting on you to get out of football practice. You know, because we came down before school started, and before the semester started, 2 days. And, you know, white guys on the team had cars, and hawkers would keep you there at 5:45. Cafeteria closed at 6. Okay. So we had to get over to Watson. There used to be a cafeteria named Watson. I don't know if you guys knew that. But it was across the highway. So it was like after we'd ran practice, worked out, been beat up, again, after showering, you got to run again because they're waiting there with some bricks or tomahawks or something. I don't know, chunk at you out of the back of a pickup truck. So, and then the coaches were standing there, some of the coaches, not all the coaches, because we had some coaches that were just, you know, coach to us as a football player or a team, any sports athlete would know this, it's your second father, you know. He's going to tell you to run, hey, leave that girl alone, you don't need this, hey, what are you doing now? You know, it's just another, he's an extension of the community, you know, black or white. I never forget Bowling Wayne, Coach Crawford, you know, he would just, I mean, he'd call you a drut, and if you don't know what drut is, that's turd spelled backwards. That fit anybody, I mean, black or white. He was just, Joe Fred Cox, he was a history teacher. Joe Cox. Fred, and I mean, they would just go back and forth. I mean, you know, you could see these white dudes do this, it was kind of cool, you know, it's like, well, maybe some people like me. And then here it is, I guess it's the soul. God looks at your heart, he weighs your heart, he weighs our hearts. And there's some people that don't don't love themselves. So how can they love you? Because they make up stuff. Your nose is bigger, your lips are bigger, your ears out, you walk with them, you're too cool. Something's wrong with you if you're black. It's nothing you can do. Something's wrong with them inside. So it's not me, I'm like, he said on the movie, I mean, you know, on the little cut, hey, you created a nigga, I don't know, this must be you. You know.
I would just like to just a couple things right quickly. I know we don't have probably another session. In terms of disparities, of course, Wiley College that's been a great improvement since the Great Debaters. Many people have just poured in millions there in the Methodist Church. Now the Methodist Church is paying more to what they did at the time. But in terms of these disparities, at Wiley, the windows were knocked out in the shower in the wintertime. You know, so it was cold, taking a shower. They fed us some kind of lean sausage about 3 times a week. They would always run out of food, run out of punch and just milk even. So when I came over during the summer to visit Dr. Brian, and so I transferred. So I went to the cafeteria. Well, first of all, in this dorm room, there was a telephone on each wall, beds and all of this, and stuff like that. And we had to wait in line for hours to use one pay phone to call home on the weekend at Wiley. And so these disparities, and then I went to the cafeteria. It wasn't just a salad bowl, it was a salad island. It was an island, huge, and whatever, it's about everything you could imagine was there, and then you could go, hear these texts, you could go back for seconds, and whatever. So I just, God, if I died and on to heaven, you know, with exposure. But, and I want people to understand too, it doesn't come out, one thing I was always cognizant of is that I never wanted to be in a position of betraying the African-American students, although I was working very hard to bring about change. There, when I chose the term asset, I really wanted something that could be perceived or seen as a part of the university. That's why I chose African-American Student Society versus Black Student Union, this kind of thing. And I had a lot of respect for Dr. Halliday, but I would be in Dr. Halliday's office, and again, I don't know what matter with me. When I walk, my ideas just floated. I was talking to Dr. Halliday about problems, this and the other, and what we need to do, and what I did. And later on, I said, you know, we told that they could have told some teachers to fail. They could have cut my financial aid. I mean, that's not talking about just being naive. But anyway, so I told Dr. Halliday, I said, I'm doing everything I can to keep the lid on things. It's like that these kids are ready to do whatever I want to do, you know, and blah, 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 stuff like that. And the noise was elsewhere, but he and I were able to communicate normally one-on-one. Anyway, and so he said to me, he said, Joe, I understand. He said, the change just can't come overnight. It's going to take some time, and I'm trying to work with that. I got to do everything I can. We kind of got in a little argument, events like that. He said, but Joe, he said, I want to do everything I can help you, but I can't let y'all destroy this university. And so I chuckled on that, but then what a lot of people didn't know is that I was aware that they had stockpiled tear gas and extra weapons for us in a little house that was out there that used to be the police, campus police department. But what they didn't know too is that even though I was talking on along with the Black students, didn't know this, I had a small cadre of individuals that were twins, Black twins who got master's degrees in computer science in 1968. They got master's degrees in 1968 from this university. At my direction or command, they were going to disable the university's computer system. Then I had this one young man come up after Dr. Halliday. I'm sorry, after Dr. Halliday, the only way to think that I've just been a Negro and whatever, because I did want to get education, but he's expensive. But anyway, this one young man comes up after Dr. Halliday addressed us, and so and he didn't commit to anything much, but he did pretty good. He did fairly well, and so this one young man who suffered spray, somebody who suffered spray. Yeah, that's okay. I'm saying he came to me and he was shaking. He said, Joe, please. He said, he's not being serious with us. He said, can we set little fires around the university? And I said, Ruben, no, we can't do that. No, we can't do that.
We got to bring it up to the thing. What do we do today?
Yeah.
This is ancient history. I mean, ancient history, but it's something you want us to do to make us come together.
And I think that hearing about the history is so important. We are actually over time, and the next session starts at 2:30, so there's a little bit of time to visit. So anybody who'd like to stay and visit with us and listen to those of you who know the
And thank you all for your audience.
Hi, my name is Fred Fuentes. I was just in the presentation and really enjoyed it. I loved hearing the historical perspective, going back to our university's history, even some of it that's uncomfortable to hear. I really enjoyed hearing the personal perspective, and it really helps determine and think about strategies to get better now for the present and even in the future.
Thank you. All right, I'm Willie Edwards, and I was here in session, and Joe Tave and Brother Page, I know them because I came in '66 here at Commerce, so I know some of the things that he was saying are very true, and so I enjoyed the presentation. I did not know about this until I actually came to the session. I'm going to look this up and talk a little bit more with Dr. Carter about the project, because she said she wants to get an oral history from me. So it's really interesting. I think this will help students today to get a sense of the years past. And again, you know, we always talk about standing on the shoulders of those who've gone on before us. This is a very good example. So Joe and they've all done a very good job. So I really appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Dr. Hunter Hayes, Literature and Languages Department, and came to the conference presentation on Dr. Carter's Clear Channel. And this is my second time seeing it. I came to the premiere a few months ago. I've been hearing about the project for a long time. She's been very enthusiastic about it, getting students involved and everyone from the community. And I'm just looking forward to seeing this, and it's a wonderful project. My only disappointment is that I have to wait until I don't know when to see part 2 of it. So it's very promising.
Thank you.